any in-state guys. Utah State has and Arkansas State. So, a majority of their teams are really, I mean, not a majority necessarily because there's 105 players on a team,
Yeah,
but if you're looking at 35 to 40 in-state guys on average at Utah State or Arkansas
yeah.
State, um, and then you're kind of going to bordering states, and you're going to Texas and JCs and
Yeah.
in Arkansas states, uh, maybe
One
it's kind of
advantage
like
we have,
Alabama instead of California, but
yeah, one advantage we have in this part of the country that you guys don't have, and I've been out west, you guys have a lot bigger states and you're a lot farther apart. Over here you can drive 4 hours and go through 3 or 4 states. So it's a different makeup. Our states aren't as big, and they're closer together. It's like I told you a while ago, Northern Alabama is all the way across Mississippi, but yet it's 4 hours from Jonesboro. So that's proved to be a good place for us to go get athletes, and we've even gone into Central Alabama some. But yeah, in our state, the Power Five program in Fayetteville gets usually who they want, and then you'll have some SEC schools or Big 12s might come in here and pick off 2 or 3 kids, and then Louisiana Tech usually tries to get some kids out of South Arkansas, and Tulsa tries to get some kids out of West Arkansas, and Memphis will go into East Arkansas. So that's usually who Arkansas State winds up battling for on a lot of high school kids.
yeah, absolutely. So diving into the game, we can come back to whatever other questions you have, Seth. But I was going to ask, so that looking at kind of the numbers, the stats so far, um, the passing average, Arkansas State may have a little bit of an edge, but nothing amazing at 192 yards per game. Um, a few things like turnover margin and maybe punting and special teams. Obviously, with Utah State skewed a little bit after after their second game that they had some bad. Well, I guess the
Mhm.
first and second game some bad punts and some mistakes on special teams. What do you think the biggest strength is of Arkansas State?
I think probably the best strength so far would be the defensive line. I think Toledo had a hard time running against Arkansas State. They broke some runs late in the game that kind of padded their numbers a little bit. I thought that Auburn at times had trouble running against Arkansas State. I think the defensive line is a strength. I think the linebackers are pretty good. I think that the safeties are good. The problem Arkansas State's had with the cornerback, and defensively the problem they've had is they have not been able to put pressure on the quarterback adequately. Like last year, they were all over the field pressuring the quarterbacks, and they forced a lot of turnovers, and they haven't gotten that. But I think you guys are probably a lot like we are in the fact that you don't really have a really good grasp of what this team is so far based on who you play, because the games that really matter the most are your peer games, and I consider this a peer game. You played USC, which obviously gave you a pretty rough day, and Auburn did the same thing to us. Toledo was obviously, in my opinion, was better than we were, and I said that going in, although a lot of people didn't listen to me. And you guys were, what was it, Weber State that you played first?
Weber State, yeah.
Yeah, Weaver State. You were better than them, so you're probably a lot like we are, trying to figure out, well, just who are we, and
Yep.
what can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I asked and see if you have some insight into that because two pretty tough games, obviously two losses for Arkansas State. It'll be interesting to see what happens coming in. One of the stats that I thought was interesting and almost really surprised me was Arkansas so far that in the first two games they've only had one sack total, in one game. And
Yeah.
I guess I can get that. I understand that against Auburn, but against a team maybe like Toledo or sometime
Well,
it would make sense that if the defensive line is a strength that maybe they'd have more sacks.
Toledo was very strong on the offensive line, and there's a and their offense is pretty much set up where you're not going to get to the quarterback. I mean,
Right.
it's pretty much snap, boom, boom, quick release, and that's what they do. I mean, I think I think that maybe we pressured the quarterback twice against Toledo, and both, I mean, just got closer, and both times he threw incomplete. We just, and we got a guy that's All-American freshman defensive end, Javon Roland Jones, and he hasn't gotten a sack yet. And he's been able to shut him down. But Auburn was a different animal. I think the coaches even talked about Auburn did some things that they weren't prepared for. And for one thing, they didn't really know what to prepare for because they'd played three quarterbacks the week before. So you kind of wonder, well, who do you prepare for? The guy that throws the ball or the
Right.
guy that runs it. So and their guy wound up having a good game against us. But it's hard to, like I said, I still don't know what this team is, and we'll find out obviously the next 3 weeks against Utah State and then Central Arkansas, which is a pretty good FCS program, and then we got the conference opener with Georgia Southern coming to Jonesboro on a Wednesday night national
Oh,
TV
wow.
game.
Okay. So,
Now, Jeff,
go ahead.
sorry, Isaac. I was just wondering, on defense, does Arkansas State run the 4-3 or a 3-4?
They'll have 3 down linemen and 2 stand-up ends. Actually, no, excuse me. They have a 4. They have a nose, pretty much a nose guard and a tackle, I think, or a 2 technique, and then they have 1 end, and then they have 2 ends. It's kind of a 4-5-2 basically, or 4-2-5. I mean 4-2-5.
Yeah, they're one. I don't remember what I saw it. I think it was either today or yesterday. When I was looking at it, they've got kind of a rusher that you could call an outside linebacker, but it's not necessarily a traditional 3-4 or a traditional 4-3 like you say. It's kind of an interesting
They have
mash of
they
the
have
two.
2 safeties and 2 corners, and they have kind of a it's been called everything from a monster to a nickel to a bandit, or I mean I have all kind of names for it. It's like a kind of a combination linebacker, defensive back, safety that's pretty much more in the pass coverage.
Right. So, is there one thing that is the biggest area of concern or biggest weakness right now that you see?
I think people are waiting for the offensive line to come together and have a good game. Haven't yet. A lot of frustration with the Toledo game. I said I thought Toledo was a better team, but it just looked like Arkansas State didn't even compete very well against them. And then obviously played well early against Auburn, and then Auburn made it just a couple of incredible plays, and then they had a fake field goal for a touchdown, and it kind of took the air out of them. So, but the offensive line has just kind of been a unit that's not really played up to expectations. Now, could be a lot of the problem was they have spring practice together because they were all beat up, and then a lot of them were still injured until they got clearance for fall camp, and so that's been an issue. And another issue has been tackling. They just have not tackled well. So it's in space, and that's something that this team did very well last year.
Now, Jeff, you talked about injuries and stuff like that. Utah State's got a couple questionable guys coming up for the game. They got kind of beat up in that USC game. How's I mean, obviously 2 games in, people are going to be dinged up and
Yeah.
hurting or whatnot. But is there anybody that's kind of questionable that impact player or whatnot?
Well, there's a nose guard, a guy named Robert Mundy, that ironically, had left school and they had applied for him to get a sixth year because of certain circumstances. He'd only played 3, and he was granted that like right before camp started. So he came in, and but he's played really well. He came in last year after UAB shut down his program. His brother uh, plays center for us, and he played really well last year. But he has a high ankle sprain, so we don't know where he will be there. We lost a reserve linebacker with the torn ACL last week, and probably our number 3 running back who could have been number 1 by the end of the year, a guy named Armin Wayway, who was at an Arizona junior college, started out at career at Texas Tech. He tore his ACL against Auburn too. So both of those guys are for sure out. But Coach Anderson said a lot of it's just, your typical bumps and bruises, and he expects everybody to be ready to go by Friday night.
Well, that's good to hear. We know all too well out here how those ACLs can kind of, ruin things for smaller programs. I mean,
yeah. Well, there were
really high-profile guys like that, and it kind of hurts them. But
yeah. Well, you'll see a lot of 5'5" Warren Wand, and Warren's a very good player. Warren, you need to go back and look at his highlights against USC last year when he ran over one of their linebackers. He's built well, and he's strong, and he's fast, and he's one of these guys that he's just short. Other than that, he's a pretty darn good football player. He'll get the bulk of the action probably at running back, and we have another guy, Johnston White, that's been nursing a hamstring, and he didn't play any against Auburn and had like 2 snaps against Toledo. They're hoping he's back, but after that, they're going on down the depth chart. They actually had to move a guy who was on the scout team up to the regular guy varsity because he was because of the loss of Wayway.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember from the last time Utah State played at Arkansas State was the multiple running backs. It seems like it may have even been that Johnson guy that kind of hurt
Johnston White,
Utah
I
State
think
more.
actually
Yeah.
he did. He was a walk on, and just a great story. And he's from Memphis, and which is about 75 miles away from Jonesboro. And he did have a good game. As a matter of fact, I have a group of friends that about 10 of us on a group chat, and we talk all the time. It's almost nonstop. Drives my wife nuts. But the victory against Utah State 2 years ago, in my opinion, is one of the 2 best victories that Anderson's had at Arkansas State. Because I still look back and I think, I don't know how A-State won that game. I mean, because they were not the better team. But sometimes the best team doesn't always win. Just able to hung around, made some plays, and got in overtime and won it. And the other one was the victory at everybody's nationally everybody's favorite Appalachian State, where A-State just pounded the dog out of them last year. But for some reason, that victory seems to be forgotten.
Yeah.
App State's kind of a sore spot among Arkansas State people, all the love that they get. So, hey, guys, we beat them by 14 last year. Had to call the dogs off, at their place. So. But that's a different story. But I do think the Utah State victory 2 years ago was pretty big, because that was not a very good team, and to win that game, I know it probably frustrated you all, but for that to happen, it was a big win.
So tell us about the new starter at quarterback. That's kind of been one of the changes too, right? Is he a graduate transfer that transferred in, or did he sit
He
out
is.
a year?
He's from Pitt. His name is Chad Boytick. He played at Pitt and was actually a starter, I believe, as a junior. And then they changed OCs, and that guy brought his guy in. So Chad basically sat and played behind him last year. And then he graduated, and so he was going to be a grad transfer, and he was all set to go to Western Illinois, I think it was. And we had an interesting situation. They had brought in a guy named Justice Hanson, JUCO at